Yep.
Great stuff. So first and foremost, George, how did you get into procurement?
I think like most people, James, by accident. Effectively, I did marketing and economics at university, and I graduated in '93, and we were just coming out the back of a recession. So I applied for a whole bunch of jobs that looked commercial. I liked business, and Hewlett Packard had an advert for a buyer. So didn't really know much about it. Applied, got the job, and did 6 months in a contract. Loved it. Got to travel and do deals and understand making things in manufacturing. And then they kind of recruited me as a kind of graduate and had a chance to spend time in different functional areas. But loved procurement, stayed there. And that was me. That was, coming up 30 years ago. And I've never looked back, really.
When you were in university, did you know about procurement or purchasing, as I guess it would have been called back then, as a viable career?
No, it didn't feature. And I did a 4-year business degree with economics and marketing as my prime, but we did all sorts of other aspects of business. But procurement as a purchasing, even, it didn't feature at all, which I think to this day remains an underlying issue for the profession. It's severely underrepresented in university versus the role it plays in the global world of business. And COVID has demonstrated that. So that there's something there for us as a professional body to address, I think.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm actually working with SIPS South of England at the moment on some marketing content for young people to have at career fairs, because you're absolutely right. Most of them have never even heard of procurement. They don't know anything about it. So we've kind of tried to go down the tact of, do you like to buy things? What's the weirdest thing you'd like to buy? Do you like spending other people's money? Just to try and make it kind of relate to them.
Yeah. Well, I think unlike many other functional professionals, what we do innately is in everybody. So everybody buys something every single day, and you manage relationships, whether it's in the family, with your neighbours, at work. So the intrinsic skills that you need to be a successful practitioner exist already. It's just honing them and professionalising them. That's the key, and that's not such a huge leap. And one of the questions we're going to talk about, what am I most proud about? And it's always the people that I help discover, develop, grow on, and see, become exceptionally good, talented procurement, purchasing professionals. And we often now just bring them up through the ranks. We hire them out of our call centre population, typically, late teens, early 20s. We'll put them through SIPS. And before you know it, we've got someone who's hugely motivated, very loyal, very capable, and we've cut out kind of mainstream education, if you like, where for 4 years they disappear into doing a degree, and then we bring them straight in to the function, and they hit the ground running, and we educate them alongside that. Because overall, I do find there is a kind of shrinking population of professional procurement personnel in the UK, but by virtue of, I think, manufacturing's decline over time. So not many industries are investing in new people coming in at the bottom of the pyramid. So we all have to take steps to address that.
It's really interesting, yeah. And then just fast forwarding from your university days up until now, what are the roles and responsibilities the procurement function holds within your organisation, and how do you split the function out?
So we've got quite a diverse, I wouldn't say unique, but very different function to the ones I've led before. So we start at the kind of discovery of new technology or new companies. So we do mergers and acquisitions, we do new technology discovery and onboarding, incubation with fintechs and so on. So spend a lot of time with the R&D part of the bank, and I've got teams embedded in there, often NDA'd on new acquisitions or kind of relationships we're trying to build. We then do the kind of end-to-end value chain. So from pre-contract to post-contract value, end-to-end total cost life cycle. The biggest area of growth is all about risk assurance. So from the very early days of bringing on that new capability right through the depth of the supply chain at the back end and managing everything in the middle. Sustainability is an ever-growing and persistent contribution we make. But I also look after internal contracts and relationship management. So as a bank, we have a ring-fenced element and a non-ring-fenced element. So we provide services internally. So I oversee and manage that. So that's a very internally focused activity. I also do risk assurance independently for the group on behalf of the divisions and policy owners. So I have that as an independent standalone capability. So it's quite a diverse range, and the team is split accordingly. So I've got your standard market-facing commodity or category leaders. I've got a specialist supply chain management or supplier relationship management function that owns the framework and end-to-end. I've got an acquisitions, mergers, and outsourcing specialist team. And then I've got a tactical procurement function that sits behind it. And then sitting across that, I've got a central services, IT support function, and then a very small, what I call agile team, focusing on the digitization of the enterprise and working with some select fintechs and big, US tech companies to further digitize the banking capability.
And for a bit of context, George, how big is your team? How many people do you have reporting into you?
Roughly 320 at the moment. So it's quite a sizable team. And
Absolutely.
Probably 3/4 of that are permanent staff, and the rest are contingent labour we bring in, for peaks and troughs and for specialists. So we've got a really good balance in the market, and we attract some really smart people that like working with us. And we try and create a community and a family feeling that everyone is part of the same group, pulling in the same direction. And it's all UK based. I've got 2 or 3 people in India and the Philippines, but largely.
Well, I lost you there for a sec. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Great stuff. And what are some of the challenges that your team is currently facing, George?
I'll put aside COVID because I think that's consistent with everyone, but that has been really a significant suck.
I think people are bored of talking about it as well.
Yeah. I think the 2 big things are understanding increasingly the depth and breadth of your supply chain. So where are the weak links? And what we're trying to do is build, technology discovery enabled capability to map out our supply chains, because our supply chains go global. They go into every corner, nook and cranny of the world. And what I'm trying to do is make sure I understand and anticipate, the risks that come with that, particularly around data. So who's got the company's data? And that's not often just your third parties. It can be your fourth and fifth parties. And the bad guys go after the lowest common denominator or weakest link in the chain. So we do a lot of time mapping out who's got what, who talks to our customers, who can bring down the enterprise, who can interrupt the service, who can stop your debit card working. All of these things we're spending a huge amount of time on. The second area is around that technology discovery. So the fintech, the financial technology company of today, could be your competitor in the future. And you and I have mentioned a few names we'll not bring to life for confidentiality reasons, but essentially, if we can help convince an early startup company that we can come in and incubate them, and there's mutual benefit in that is a kind of new role for procurement to play. And it's one that we're trusted to participate in because we bring a lot of business acumen. We can make it very easy for a company to work with us, to be approved and get on the approved list. It's done in days, not months. We help them grow. We give them advice and guidance. So all in, it's a kind of win-win outcome. So getting access to these suppliers is tough because everyone's fighting for them. And then bringing them through the company. So these would be the 2, I guess, most intellectually challenging issues we're facing into that differentiate us and require a kind of new level of thinking and dare I say, a new professional edge to the typical procurement professional.
What are you most passionate about when it comes to procurement, George?
The people, 100%. I just love working with people. So whether they be our business clients in the divisional structures, whether they be the suppliers that we get to work with, the regulators. Banking is quite unique in that the degree of regulation is quite heavy, and rightly so, because we run the core UK infrastructure of financial services. But just getting to work with people and understand their challenges, understand their development needs. And it's fantastic to see people grow that you've helped nurture and encourage and develop. And you learn so much, pre the lockdown, I used to travel quite regularly internationally and just meeting fellow practitioners, whether they be CPOs or specialists in other areas, thought leaders in industry, I just get a chance in this job to do a lot more of that than I would in probably any other function in the group. And that's at the heart for any professional, procurement individual, surely is the chance to get out there and discover and meet people.
And what do you think are some of the key focus areas now within procurement?
I think there's a lot of focus now on the softer skills of the profession.
Okay.
We're no longer somebody that turns up with a process that takes you on a journey from pre-contract to post-contract management. We're much more about how can we help the business develop competitive advantage over a long-term cycle? How can we understand the rapidly changing technology landscape? How can we understand the kind of growing risk threats to the business? So the conversation at the executive and board level has to change. Savings are like the blood that runs through your body. You have to deliver them year over year. As tough as that seems, it's just what we do, but it's no longer enough. If that's all you turn up with, then you're going to kind of fall into irrelevance, I'd suspect. So it's much more about that competitive advantage, helping grow the enterprise, protect the enterprise. And as most organisations now increasingly rely on third parties, it's the perfect time for the function to really be stepping up and being visible. Because we often complain about knocking a seat at the top table, and often that's our fault. And I think we've got amazing opportunities now to ensure that's a given.
You mentioned that you love working with people and things that you kind of tend to look for in younger people moving into procurement. When you're hiring somebody, what do you look for?
I think there's 2 or 3 basic things. One is desire and passion, right? They have to have a sense of what they want to achieve and have the energy and kind of ability to do that. I think the next thing is a bit of business acumen. It's been able to conceptualize what business is all about. What problems are we trying to solve with the third party supply chain coming in. I often, go through little games with them around, right? If you had to go and reduce the cost of your coffee intake, or if you think about the last big purchase you made, how did you go about it? How would you do it differently? So it's to find that little nugget or spark of business awareness that's really crucial. And the other thing is a combination of being able to demonstrate resilience, but also ability to get on with people and deal with challenging situations. So if you put these 3 things together, then inevitably I think they prove good ingredients for a professional procurement colleague to emerge out of the natural training we'll give them and all the aspects of the function.
Sure. And what are you guys doing with regards to sustainable procurement? You touched upon it a little bit earlier.
Well, I'm doing a huge amount. Sustainability has been with me since the day I started. So whether it was eliminating CFCs or lead back in the manufacturing days to now being more considerate beyond just complying with the legal environmental standards. So we've done a lot recently with, I think I can mention them, EcoVadis, they're out there as one of the predominant leaders. And their methodology is embedding in now in our pre-contract work. And we're working through a pretty large pilot to effectively ensure that beyond our contractual obligations and you meeting your legal and regulatory and diversity agendas, you have to comply with a certain ability to score on the EcoVadis range. So for us, the fact that our logo is green, there is naturally a lot of pressure from a lot of stakeholder angles in banking and other industries to ensure that sustainability is at the heart of what you do. So responsible sourcing, sustainable sourcing. For example, with the uniforms that we clad our colleagues in at branches, we make sure we're very clear on where everything down to the cotton is sourced, and it's ethically sourced and ethically produced. So we do thematic audits to ensure that that's the case. So we do a lot, James, and it's in our DNA. It's not something else. It's something at the core of every decision that we take.
Oh, good to hear. And the next section, George, is it more of a pick and mix? So I didn't know if there were any specific questions that you wanted to answer, or if you were happy for me to just kind of pick some.
I think that the one, what's the biggest risk I've taken? The biggest risk when I think back is converting from an individual contributor as a buyer to a supervisor or manager. I loved doing the deal, right? I had two years as a buyer, solving problems, doing deals, traveling out to see suppliers all over the place. And I was like a free spirit almost. And then my boss asked me, would I manage the team? And I can honestly say I was pretty horrified and ran scared from it. But on reflection, he saw something in me that suggested that I could do that. And it was a massive risk to me because I thought it could potentially kill my passion for procurement. And who wants to be a manager in their early 20s? It's probably one of these things you run from. But anyway, I took that risk on, and I've now probably achieved the pinnacle of where you can reach in the profession. But I've done it gradually. I've been very thoughtful of career moves and decisions. And it's not a risk about a deal I've done or an outsource I've made or, a particular hire or anything. There's kind of loads of examples of these things. But I think that nugget for me is reflected on that question. That's what immediately came to the front of my mind. And if I hadn't taken that risk, I wouldn't be where I am. So I think there's a message out there for practitioners that, doing the deal, or in most buyers' cases, as you think of procurement, think about helping someone else do a better deal and achieving through others. And you learn to get a lot of satisfaction from that. I still like being involved with the team and getting a sense of what they've done, but I learn a lot from them. I don't have all the answers. So that would probably be the biggest one, James.
I really, just before we go on to the next one, George, I really liked what you said there about you did it gradually and you were thoughtful about your career steps. Because I don't know about you, but I think sometimes people try to advance their career too quickly and they jump around from role to role too quickly, thinking that it's the right thing to do. But I think in the long term, it can sometimes be detrimental. What are your thoughts on that, George?
I'd agree. Yep. I didn't start off at 21 thinking I wanted to be a chief procurement officer by a certain age, or a director, or a head of function, or a senior manager, or whatever. And if I reflect, when I joined Hewlett-Packard, that lasted 7 years, and then Hewlett-Packard had a new chief exec. They divested a company called Agilent Technology. So I had a choice: do I go with a new divested company or stay with Hewlett-Packard? I chose to take the risk of leaping with the new company. I just saw the excitement with that, and it was a chance to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, if you like. So I took on a global kind of category management role. I took on an engineering team for the first time because I'm not a natural engineer. So that really stretched me. And the next step was, post the kind of tech bubble burst. I don't know if you remember in the 2000s, early 2000s, 99, 2000, the tech industry went into a tailspin. And I kind of worked that wave. I kind of stayed with Agilent and I moved into various different jobs, working in different cultures, spending a lot of time in Asia, the US, all over Europe. And then I took a decision based on my family, my second young kid coming along, and I chose to join Bank of Scotland. So very different. It was much more non-direct, more UK focused. But I thought, well, I need to get some non-direct experience under my belt. Banking sounded like an area that was desperate to learn and grow, because more than half the cost base of a typical bank is third-party spend. Then the financial crash happened. Boom, second big turmoil of my. And funny enough, it was 9 years after the tech bubble burst, so 2008-9, and then got acquired by Lloyds Banking Group. So new chief executive, new team. I kind of stayed with that organisation, and then zoom forward to last year. It was my 13th anniversary in Lloyds Banking Group, but I've had 3 chief executives in that time, more bosses than I can remember, and it's felt like 3 different companies as we've evolved, and the priorities of the job have changed. So to all intents and purposes, I've not gone looking for jobs. They've kind of found me, but I've been brave enough to stay and learn and grow and develop, and I've benefited as a consequence. You're able to build networks, understand how the business runs, and as long as you're constantly refreshing yourself, adding new accountabilities, taking on new stretches, you can get the excitement that comes with notionally moving every 2 or 3 years. And there are some professional CPOs out there that do that, and good luck to them. It's not necessarily for me. I'd like to build sustainable long-term beyond a kind of 3-year program horizon. And I've really enjoyed that. And that comes with seeing people grow and develop over a longer period of time.
Fantastic. Were there any other of the pick and mix questions that you saw and you thought, yeah, I'd like to answer that one, George?
I think the one, what advice would I give people embarking on a new procurement career? Probably 3 pieces of advice. Be constantly curious, and curious in terms of understanding how the business runs and how the supply market can help it run better. Because to me, that is the essence of procurement or sourcing. Understand the business, understand the supply markets, fuse together solutions and sell them. I think secondly, continually learn. Always stretch yourself. Don't spend all your time in procurement, sourcing, purchasing, supply chain management. Try and spend time in adjacent functional areas that you support. So whether that's a stint in marketing, planning, manufacturing, production, R&D, engineering, go and spend secondments in these areas, because if you're supporting them, you're better understanding their perspective of you from where they sit. And probably the third one, mention the function as little as possible. Don't turn up at meetings and say, I'm the guy from procurement. Talk about, I'm a business professional, I'm here to help you. And I'm here to listen, not tell. I'm not a blocker, I'm an enabler. So it's to learn to sell the function in a way that's not natural. Because I've seen too many people turn up to say, well, there's a process and a policy and a set of rules, you have to follow them. And they go in sequence and they move at a certain pace. And if you don't do it, you're in trouble. That turns off most businesses. And the reason in Lloyds we've got close to 100% compliance, if you want to use that term, is because we make it easy for the business to do the right thing. And that essentially sees them flock to us. They get great service. They come back again and again and again. We've never had an issue, in that regard. And I know when you go to a lot of the forums or you get in conversations with many peers, compliance to policy or how much of your spend is under management type percentages are somewhere between the 60 and 80%. And I think the way to get that much higher is that type of approach. So they'd be 3 things, I guess, I would offer out there.
Those are some really great lessons for somebody a lot earlier on in their career. Was there anybody in your career when you were a bit more junior that had a big impact on you, where you learned significant things from?
Yeah, there was a chap called Bill Rendell, and he's sadly no longer with us, but he was a manager that I guess saw in me something that he thought he could mold and shape into a kind of better procurement professional, if you like. So Bill he set up an R&D team for procurement. So we had real trouble with the labs going off and designing in componentry and choosing suppliers that we had never heard of. And we were always playing catch up. So Bill had the epiphany to say, right, I'm going to create a specialist team. I'm going to go and sit in the lab. I'm going to mold out procedures and policies or remold them to suit them. And he handpicked a small team of 4 people, and he asked me to be part of that. And the genius of it has never stopped inspiring me. And I learned so much from the guy about how to manage relationships, being curious, go and discover, go and build the product, take the bits you buy and stitch it together, and then say, well, hang on, why have we got 13 different types of screw putting a box together? Could we do it with 3? Simplify things. Little lessons like that. He was a genius. And way before his time in the early 90s doing this type of thing. So yeah, he definitely gave me that sense of proximity to the business, simplify things, talk in their language, make it easy for them to work with you, and constantly be in dialogue and be physically present with your clients. Lessons I've always taken with me.
Sounds like a bit of a visionary.
He was, yeah, amazing guy, really, really good guy. And again, 30 years experience in the same company. He never left. He didn't have to go anywhere to kind of accumulate skills. He just worked on his craft and was truly professional. Probably long before we got recognised, and we were called purchasing back then. We just bought the bit. So yeah, a bit of a visionary.
And what would you say is your biggest achievement in your career so far, if there was one that stood out?
My biggest achievement. I think my biggest achievement are the hopefully dozens of people that have worked with me that will, recognise or help them in a little way. Mm-hmm. I've caused them to have a passion for the function. I've brought loads of people into the function that would never have considered it as a career path. And I think it's an aggregation of the differential gain, if you like, for the community. That there's a lot of people out there that would hopefully positively reflect on, the time we've worked together. And that's where I get my strength and energy, is working from people and seeing them improve and get better, and help the profession constantly professionalise and be relevant in business. So if I've played a little part in the career progression of, you know, a number of people, then that's the thing I'm probably most proud of.
This next section, George, is all around COVID-19, and there's six different questions that I've got. But I mean, rather than just going through it, I don't want to make this a COVID-19 discussion. It would be good if you could just give us a bit of an overview of the way that procurement has had to respond to the challenges of COVID-19 at Lloyds.
Yeah, so I guess we were early pathfinders in this, because as a function, we were the first to go home. So because we all had laptops, we were all used to remotely working. Pretty much everyone on my team worked at least a day a week from home. We were asked to go and pilot home working early March, and off we went. And at that time, we were starting to hear from our global supply chain contacts of shortages of PPE, toilet roll, dear, I mentioned it, in Asia and Australia and places like that. So our network started to tune us in to what was to come. I would argue not early enough. I think there's a collective industry lesson there to learn about the probability of a catastrophe actually happening. The impact was clear. So what we started to do was push the buttons on our supply chain deep dives. So we quickly established where the stress points were. So which companies were likely to go into lockdown in India and the Philippines, which supply chains were likely to be curtailed around, you know, PC kits, etc., laptops. And we then embarked on a program of enabling home working. So when the button was pushed, the first thing we got involved in, we set this program up, Office at Home. We've won external and internal awards for that, because we mobilised a team without much permission. We sought permission afterwards to essentially establish a cross-functional team led by procurement to pull together property, IT, various reps from the different divisions. And over probably 8 to 10 week period, we enabled 40 to 50,000 colleagues with chairs, laptops, food stools, everything they needed. We made it really easy. We converted an online ordering system internally so they could order. We had a central budget for it, so there was no quibbling over that. And so far, we've had a very successful home deployment. We still have 50-odd thousand people working from home safely, connecting. Everything's worked. The next thing we were doing alongside that was just keeping the capacity in our supply chains going. So as business plans or contingency plans failed, where it was all about moving people from one building to another when you've got an infectious population. So we were working a lot to enable home working in our supply chains. So we took a lot of the lessons we learned ourselves. We re-reviewed our risk appetite. And then it was just around assurance of supply of goods and services into our data centres, into our offices and branches, and PPE kits, sanitizer. We've had to keep all our branches open as an essential service. And if you've gone to a bank, you'll see it's very well provisioned, irrespective of the brand, very safe environments. So yeah, that would be the kind of summary of the initial couple or 3 months. I guess over time, Brexit emerged for us as a bit of a unique challenge in the UK. So that conflated with COVID and the re-emergence of the second wave just heightened awareness. But overall, our supply chain has remained remarkably resilient. It's brought us and the businesses and the supply chain closer. We've better understood each other. The kind of humanity shown has been outstanding, to look after people, irrespective if they're permanent members of the group or employees of the suppliers. We were inextricably linked in this together. What would we do differently? Would be a kind of key reflection point. I think with the whole industry or the world is take these things more seriously, is to exactly extrapolate out what could happen. The playbook for pandemics was sadly underutilized, I think, in many companies and organizations, but we were able to make up for that in the response and the pace of it, the focus of it, the collegiate nature of it. And overall, it's been something we've handled well. There's nothing's gone disastrously wrong. It's now the persistence of the lockdown and just the humane side of that, keeping everyone motivated and joined up and collaborating, because none of us have been in the office since March. None of us have physically met, obviously, since March. And in a people-based business, that's really tough.
Yeah.
but we've managed it, despite all the challenges.
Good. And I think, now that we're in 2021 and we've realized that things haven't really changed that much. Obviously, we've got the vaccine being rolled out, but the lockdowns are going to be here for a while. I think it gives businesses like Lloyds the ability to actually plan a bit more into the future rather than have to change everything every month or so.
Yeah, it's also accelerated our investments, James, in enabling home working. So it is now part of our contingency plan. So if we have a weather event, rather than switch calls to an area not affected by the weather or offshore, we would do that essentially from home. We're actually finding productivity levels in certain areas improving because colleagues can now switch on for the otherwise difficult shifts, 6 till 9. It's difficult to convince someone to come into a big call centre to do that shift, especially if they've got childcare accountability. So there's upsides to the learnings. We've also been doing much more remote assurance, so using handheld cameras to do physical security checks, and just leveraging the technology available. So we won't go back to as was, we'll go back to a better as usual, I think would be a term I'd use, if we can achieve that.
So with regards to Brexit, obviously I lead our financial services practice and I'm sat here with the CPO of Lloyds. It would be remiss of me not to ask what your thoughts are on the trade deal and its impact on financial services in the UK.
I think as with most trade deals, the provision for financial services like passport and etc. was excluded. I'm hopeful that we'll both jointly come together over the next few months and get that sorted out. I think that's more a banking and financial consideration. For me, in terms of the practicalities of borders, the three things we worried about were access to labour into the UK, because many of our suppliers rely on labour both from within and out with the natural UK boundaries. So far, that's been fine. The settlement approach that was taken was positive. We've not seen any degradation of key workers that we would need being able to travel right through our enterprise. Goods and services have continued. We naturally took some provisions with some of our key suppliers to ensure the appropriate buffer stocks were in place. But other than a few learnings that people have had in terms of sequencing paperwork and getting their IT systems linked, we've not seen any major concern. And then the other was, I guess, currency fluctuations, if it had been perceived to have gone wrong or a no deal, where as we buy globally, converting into sterling, and again, we've not seen much of any variation there. So overall for us, Brexit has gone as smoothly as we could possibly have hoped for in the practical supply of goods and services. As I said, the future still to be determined more fully in the financial consideration of how we trade together.
But it sounds like you're fairly optimistic.
Yeah, you have to be. In this profession, you have to be, James, right? There's so many things could and do go wrong on a day-to-day basis. You have to see the glass half full. But that's predicated on, a good understanding of the situation, having experts working around you, being very professional, and you kind of have confidence in your team and your company to get through whatever is thrown at it. And I don't think 2020 can be repeated. And this organisation has survived the financial crash. We survived COVID and Brexit rolled into one. So we're quite resilient as a culture. And I think that transcends the kind of shock of some of these things coming at you. It's how you respond to what's beyond your control. And I think that is a mantra for procurement in general, because things go wrong on a day-to-day basis that you just can't anticipate. But it's how you respond, I think, that's key.
Brilliant answer. Thank you for that, George. Really appreciate it. Outside of your professional life, what do you like to do in your spare time?
What do I do? Well, it's interesting that COVID it's ended up, I've spent a lot more time fishing as a passion. I've learned to fly fish.
Oh, wow.
I've always fished. I come from the Hebrides up just locally, a local couple of lakes and lochs I fish on. But I was always interested in fishing anyway, but this particular aspect of it, I keep fit. I do a lot of Monroes and walking, tennis, and I've just recently acquired a puppy with the kids over the last sort of 4 months, which has been interesting. So that's got me into a further routine of getting out and about and walking. Do a lot of gardening, DIY. So quite an active, I think it's really important to have an active life out with, because the job can be really intense and constant 24/7 in the nature of what we do. So you need escapes and things you can have a passion for outside.
What kind of dog have you got?
It's a cockapoo. It's a little cross.
Oh yeah, a good
Cocker spaniel. Yeah, they're nice temperament. They don't shed hair. Very easy, ozy, good fun. Can cope with a bit of exercise. So yeah, all round seems a good acquisition.
Great stuff. And if you could give any advice to your younger self, George, what would it be?
What would it be? I just think follow your passion. And the probably best piece of advice I ever got was, if you're exceptionally good at something but you don't have passion for it, give it up. If you have passion for something you're not good at, try and push it on, but probably you're going to give it up. If you're good at something and you have passion for it, you've got the winning formula. And I think procurement, for me, brought that together for all the reasons I've mentioned. So I just love what I do, and I think I'm good at it. And if you're good at something you have passion for, you'll do well in life. Don't push and aspire to get to the top from the very beginning. Don't fall into the trap in these interviews when they say, well, what's your 5-year plan? Where are you going to be in 5 years? I kind of take it, a year at a time. And as long as I feel I'm moving and learning and growing and developing and demonstrating value and proving my worth, things will take care of themselves. But also have the ambition and belief. If you really want to push on and progress from being an individual contributor or a first line manager right up to CPO, then I reckon that quite a significant number of people could do it. They just need to have the belief and confidence, sponsorship and stakeholder support around them. So I guess a collection of things there, James, but all in, it's have the belief in yourself. And if you're passionate for procurement, you'll go as far as you want.
Fantastic. This next question, George, a lot of people struggle with this because it puts you on the spot, but do you have an interesting fact that you can tell us about yourself?
English is my second language.
Really?
I grew up in the Hebrides, and Gaelic, which is a variation, it's a Scottish language in of itself. It comes from the Norse Celtic culture. So that was my language, spoken to largely with my grandparents and my mum. My dad was English. And so English came alongside Gaelic. So as much as you talk to me today, you wouldn't have any reason to think that. But yeah, it's a kind of secondary language. That would be probably a fact that's interesting.
That is interesting. And do you still use it?
Very rarely. I actually, you forget languages. It's not like riding a bike or swimming. I use it with some friends and occasionally with my mum. But yeah, it's not something my kids have been taught. And because I'm out of that community and culture now, yeah, it's not so easy to have a chance to speak it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a personal motto that you live by? And if so, what is it?
I don't know if I've got a motto. My favourite phrase is, don't wait for the storm to pass, learn to dance in the rain. And it's not attributable to anyone in particular. And it's something I picked up many years ago on a leadership course I was on. And it really resonated for me in procurement because it's raining every day. So whether it's line stops, suppliers going out of business, no capacity in the supply chain, a data intrusion, cyber attack, but every day is different. And if I didn't learn to deal with that, I'd be drowned by the rain. So it's a great phrase I kind of live by and I often use when I talk to people. And at the heart of that, it's being resilient, believe in yourself. There's always a solution. There's always a problem there's never a problem that can't be fixed, particularly in procurement supply chain. You have to find a solution. It's just a matter of time. So that would be my motto, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I love that. That's good. I like that. I think I'm gonna utilize that one if that's okay. I'll borrow it from you, George. Great stuff. Well, look, that concludes the interview today, George. So thank you very much for your time. It's been really insightful and interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, it was good, James. Well done.